Hello and welcome back to Mental Health Toolkit. My name is Annie and thanks for joining today. I'm going to be talking about an emotional regulation skill called the feelings model today, and this pairs really well with some of the previous videos where I talk through the general idea of emotional regulation, and also have a video in my channel called MEDS where I teach an emotional regulation skill called MEDS, MEDDSS. And those are a set of behaviors you can engage in that help you decrease your sensitivity and vulnerability to emotions and also decrease the intensity of them. Today I'm going to talk you through a model called the feelings model that kind of gives a bigger picture process for how you can look at your feelings as it is a part of the journey of looking at an event that has happened in your life that maybe you have strong emotions about. I really like this skill because it kind of breaks down events that may play out that kind of are a whirlwind or happen and you move on and you didn't really reflect over them. It kind of helps us slow down and take them apart and really look at what played out. We want to keep in mind with emotional regulation skills that these skills are not meant to stifle your emotional experience. They're actually meant to encourage you to have emotions, to be curious about them. They're not meant for you to control your emotions to the point that you don't feel them deeply, that you don't experience them for what they are, but rather to engage more effectively in your life, considering how you feel about something. They may actually encourage you to take a riskier, more courageous step to have a harder conversation with somebody because you feel so deeply about something. So keep that in mind. So the feelings model has 6 steps. The first step is describing an event that's happened to you, and typically an event that you have strong emotional or physical reaction to. Describe your interpretation or judgment or belief around that event, what happened. Describe your feelings and body sensations related to it. Then your action urge, so what's the initial response that you have or action you want to take. Then describe the action that you actually did take in that event. What did you do to respond? What did you say or not say? And then finally, what were the results? So kind of reflecting on what played out, what did you like, what did you not like, how might you do some things differently next time? So I'm going to use a pretend example with a pretend person we're going to call Tommy, where he gets fired from his job, and we're going to talk through each of these steps briefly. So describing the event, Tommy was fired recently. He'd worked for this employer for 3 years, and he had an emergency come up where he had to take care of his 7-year-old daughter. He shares custody with his ex-wife, and yet the ex-wife needed him to care for their daughter last minute. He was happy to do so, and so he called off of work, which he had done every once in a great while. It was never a problem before, and called off work. But then a second night passed and he had to call off work again 2 days in a row last minute because he continued to have to take care of his daughter. The third day when he went into work, his employer fired him. So Tommy's initial interpretation or judgment of what played out is that he thought he was reliable and consistent. He had been a good employee for years. They had always been okay with him calling off last minute because he did it so infrequently. He believed that his employer should be loyal to him because he never missed work like this in the past, other than once in a great while, and they never seemed to have a problem with it. And he felt at this point like he couldn't trust his employer, and even if he worked somewhere else, maybe he won't feel like he can trust other people. His feelings around this might be he feels betrayed, helpless, and outraged. His physical reaction might be he feels really hot in his head and his heart is beating faster, his chest feels constricted. And his action urge might be he wants to go tell his boss off, or he wants to post negative comments on Facebook about his workplace, maybe even give a bad Yelp review. But then the action that Tommy takes, let's say maybe he kind of takes a minute, reflects on what he really wants to do. He maybe reaches out to his friend who works at a different restaurant, and this friend encourages him, affirms that he has a right to be angry, And Tommy decides that he's going to request a phone conversation with his boss, his old employer, and talk through what happened, figure out if there's anything that can be done. And maybe his employer is willing to do that, and his employer still doesn't hire him back, but is willing to hear him out and process what happened. And so the results of this are mixed, right? The employer listens to Tommy. Tommy takes a risk to have a hard conversation, and yet he doesn't get hired back, and he thinks that's a ridiculous response. He doesn't agree. Maybe he feels good about the conversation that he had, his part of it, but he's still really disappointed, feels very betrayed by this employer for not hearing his side enough to hire him back. And so as we look at this pretend scenario, I want you to consider a situation in your life where you might have strong emotions, where you might feel betrayed, helpless, hopeless. You might feel really alone. And what played out? And what did you want to do? And what did you end up doing? And how might you learn from that experience? What your part of it was. Not, we can't control other people, and we can't make other people do what we want them to do always, but we can take ownership of ourselves and consider what we can learn from our life experiences. As you go through this model, remember to be kind to yourself.